Today we're diving into one of the most brilliant and, frankly, one of the most shocking essays ever written, Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal. And really, to get it, you have to start by looking at the plan itself, presented in its own horrifyingly practical terms.
So, the author starts out with this really calm tone, like a chef or maybe an economist, suggesting a new food source for the kingdom. A source that is, and I'm quoting here, delicious, nourishing, and wholesome.
And it's not just about the food. Oh, no. The plan is efficient. It considers the secondary markets. Nothing goes to waste, you see. The byproducts can be used to make these high-fashion accessories for the wealthy. It's a perfect model of efficiency.
He even sets a market price, framing the whole thing in purely economic terms. 10 shillings for the carcass. A totally reasonable price, he argues, for any gentleman to pay for a high-quality product.
Okay, yeah. Who on earth would seriously propose this? The answer is absolutely nobody. What we've just read isn't a genuine plan, it's a trap. And to understand that trap, we've got to unmask the person who wrote it.
So let's talk about unmasking the projector, the man behind this monstrous mask. Because the voice we hear in A Modest Proposal, it isn't a monster. It's a mask. It's a very carefully constructed character, and it's being worn by a literary genius to make a furious, desperate point about the world he was living in. The weapon being used here is satire. See, Swift isn't actually promoting cruelty. He's using this extreme, absolutely outrageous exaggeration to attack the very real cruelty that he sees all around him.
And he does this through a brilliant device, the persona. The narrator, the guy we've been listening to, isn't actually Jonathan Swift. Nope, it's a fictional character he created, a kind of Enlightenment projector, sort of a social reformer type who truly believes any problem can be solved with cold, detached, rational logic.
And this distinction, it is everything. On one side, you have the real author, Jonathan Swift, a passionate, angry moralist just horrified by the state of Ireland. And on the other side, you have his creation, the projector, a political economist who looks at a human crisis and only sees profit and loss. Swift basically built a monster to show us the monsters that were already walking around.
So how does this all work? I mean, how does Swift make this absolutely insane proposal so chillingly effective? Let's take a look at the architecture of his satire.
First, pay really close attention to the language. The projector never ever uses words like mother or child. He uses the vocabulary of animal farming. Women are breeders, children come from a dam, and the entire nation's poor are just stock. Swift uses this language to mirror how he believed the ruling class already saw the Irish poor, not as people, but as a subhuman resource to be managed.
And then he uses the cold, precise language of bureaucracy. He calculates, he subtracts, he arrives at a number, 120,000 units that need to be dealt with. This is meant to sound just like the detached jargon of politicians and economists who discuss real human suffering in spreadsheets, totally removed from the actual reality of it.
This is the logical trap Swift sets for the reader. Step 1. He asks you to accept the premise that the poor are just an economic problem. Okay? Step 2, you follow the projector's logical calculations. And the horror comes at step 3, where that cold economic reasoning slams right into basic human morality. The shock isn't that the math is wrong, it's that the premise itself is monstrous.
Okay, so if the proposal is a fiction, what's the real horror? What was Swift actually so furious about? Well, let's expose the true targets of his fury.
This slide really gets to the core of Swift's argument. On the left, you have his fictional proposal, but on the right, you have the real-world horrors he was seeing every day. Swift's point is that his society was scandalized by the idea of cannibalism, but was perfectly fine tolerating the actual reality of starvation, neglect, and even children being sold into slavery.
So, the whole point is to expose this massive hypocrisy. Swift is basically screaming from the rooftops that society is obsessed with the appearance of morality while totally ignoring the deeply immoral reality right in front of its eyes.
So you see, the real monster isn't the projector. It's the persons of quality, the wealthy landlords, the indifferent politicians. Swift is arguing that through their greed and their apathy, they were already metaphorically devouring the poor and their children.
And that leads us to the final question, really.
Why does this essay, nearly 300 years later, still have such a powerful sting? Why does satire sometimes have to hurt so much?
Well, it's because its purpose isn't to make you feel good or comfortable. It's like a surgical tool. It's designed to be a shock to the system, to cut right through our complacency and force us to confront an ugly truth we'd all much rather ignore.
And this is why anyone who accuses the essay of being in bad taste has just fallen right into Swift's trap. He wants you to be offended. Of course he does, but not by his essay. He wants you to be offended by the social reality he's holding a mirror up to. The proposal is just the symptom. The disease is the injustice that society was ignoring.
And this all leaves us with a final pretty unsettling thought. Swift used this extreme satire because he felt like no one was listening to reason. So the question for us today is this: what unbearable truths have we normalized? What horrors do we just accept as the way things are that might require a new modest proposal to finally force us to see them clearly?